Welcome to Warehouse Automation Matters. I'm your host, Mary Hart, and I'm here with our very own Kait Peterson to talk about the power of unmatched flexibility and unlimited throughput for warehouses. Kait, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mary, for having me. I'm really excited to talk about today's topic.
Yes, it's going to be a great topic that warehouses will want to listen about. Can you share a bit about your role at Locus Robotics for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the VP of Product Marketing, which means that I manage everything that goes to market about our product. So super fun because I like to sit between sales, marketing, and product. So we're kind of in the middle of the Venn diagram. I have an awesome team. I've been here about 3 years and been about in the industry just shy about 15 years. So a lot of supply chain tech experience prior to Locus.
And a lot of information and knowledge about the supply chain in warehouses, which is what we have you here for today. From your perspective, why is flexibility so critical in modern warehouse operations?
I think flexibility is really, really critical because it allows for companies to be dynamic and both proactive and responsive to what's going on in their supply chain. We've had a ton of change over the last several years within the supply chain, whether that is everything from major disruptions due to things like COVID 19 or natural disasters, that type of thing, to being able to serve customers like through flash sales and trends, and if everybody remembers like the Stanley Cup trend, right? So flexibility is key because you can be able to both be proactive and reactive on that. And there's a couple of different elements of flexibility, whether that's, your throughput, your space, what assets you're leveraging, your staffing, all of that. So there's a lot of different variables that create nth degree combinations of how you can optimize your supply chain and your warehouse.
Thank you. We talked about some of the challenges like the TikTok sales that would bring, more demand to the warehouse and also challenges of labor and things like that, especially with the LA fires and the like where people could be totally disrupted. What are some of the other challenges that warehouses face today that require a more flexible automation approach?
I think a couple of the challenges are, well, I think labor is number one. I mentioned that, but not just labor in terms of like availability and cost, but what the expectations are for the changing generation of workforce, right? What different people are expecting from their job, having more and easier ways to do their job in, working with newer tech or not doing as much manual labor. So that's one key challenge. I think the different trends economically are a big challenge. And then I think just the dynamic needs of what's going on in the warehouse. I like to say that every warehouse is the same, but everyone is fundamentally different. Everybody is special. So once you've been in one warehouse, you've kind of been in them all, but you haven't because everybody does something completely unique, whether it's a pack out process or an inbound process or the way that they pack their orders specifically for e-commerce or case picking. So being able to be flexible along all of those different variety of needs is huge. And those are the challenges that our customers are coming up against, whether it's a customer ABC wants me to move non-conveyables, non-con materials, or they need me to move tubes of lipstick. Those are two very different asks and could come to the same customer at the same time, particularly if you're a 3PL or your service provider, that type of thing. Those are some of the biggest challenges. I think another challenge is there's a lot of pressure in the market to work with AI and what that means. A lot of, it's the latest buzzword. A few years ago, it was blockchain. Now it's AI. How do you work smarter and better in your warehouse? And how do you actually solve for the right problems, not just, use AI because it's fun? So I think a lot of warehouse operators are also asking, how do I make my operations smarter and more intelligent, leveraging data and leveraging other solutions to be able to be more efficient?
Hearing about blockchain reminded me about how I used to write white papers for customers on blockchain, and you would think that that would have been for years to come, and I haven't heard a thing about blockchain in recent years.
Right?
It might still be out there, but I haven't heard about it.
I don't think AI is going to go the same way as
No.
blockchain, but I think it's got the same level of hype.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
was blockchain everything. It was the then back then, and now it's AI everything. So, how does automation contribute to the warehouse's ability to be able to react and even be proactive, hopefully, for fluctuating demands that might happen or new use cases or new customers?
Yeah, so there's a couple of dimensions, like as I mentioned earlier, there's dimensions around like the basics of the space, right? Do you have space for inventory A and inventory B, and where do you put that? So that's one dimension. Number two is how do you pick that inventory or how do you put it away? How do you put it into your system? How do you pull it out of your system? And the ability for the material handling equipment, whatever you're choosing, whether it's carts from a manual perspective, forklifts or pallet dollies or all your processes, how are you handling that variety of inventory, right? Coming through the warehouse. Then there's flexibility of space. So, do you need to move vertically in your warehouse to maximize the space that you need to take advantage of? And then, how do you flex up and down from a volume or a throughput perspective? We just came off of peak season where we shipped over 2,000 robots out to the field. And they're for a temporary time frame. So everybody's familiar with the peak season in the US, where you've got the holidays, you've got Black Friday, you've got Cyber Monday, and that leads to a ton of volume going through the network all at one time, all to be delivered before a very specific date. And then you have the reverse process of a bunch of material coming back through returns. So, how do you pick automation that handles both the ability to scale up and meet those demands, but you're not paying for it in April, May, June, July when you're seeing different levels of volume go through your facility? So, being able to scale your automation up and down is a key way of doing that. Automation fundamentally allows you to scale your operation without having to throw 100 more people at it or buy 5 more forklifts or, add 15 more racking systems to be able to handle the influx, right? So automation really helps you kind of add those processes in a scalable way without having to do a ton of manual work.
So talking about the returns, you can have people returning those Stanley Cups because they want the new Stanley Cup, or they have those presents just didn't hit the mark. How can it help them scale effectively while maintaining that efficiency and flexibility that they need in order to create throughput?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges is, as you mentioned, kind of like maintaining your efficiency as you're scaling up and down. Like most people don't have time to close their facility for a week to, ramp it up and put all the inventory in just so that they can deal with it and then close their facility down. And they don't have time to put in a whole, steel structure, that type of thing. So one of the keys is keeping your operation moving while you're adding that scalability, that flexibility. So in the peak example, we have a customer that I was at a little while ago that has like a 4 level mezzanine. And each peak season, they bring in several hundred more robots and they just drop them into their current facility, right? So their current facility is already running, it's running at the levels that they need it to. But to add more to that facility, they just drop more robots in. They even move them floor to floor as they have different sales across different floors. Like their whole web inventory is in this pick tower mezzanine. And so at different times, they might have different sales on different levels and they move the robots around. And then when they're done, they kind of take those back out, but the system is still running. The system is still working. It's still maintaining its efficiency. And there's no new training or no new associates that are needed. So that ramp up period is seamless. So that's key, is that operational integrity while you have the ability to move up and down and out for new use cases as well. You mentioned kind of what happens when you have a bunch of return
Mhm.
influx coming back to your facility, where your facility is typically truckload inbound inventory, and then you're picking from, different cases in different locations. What happens if you have a bunch of eaches coming back to your facility that need to be sorted, that need to be re-put away, and then they can be re-eligible for picking? That's a whole backwards process that most people aren't prepared for in the large volumes that sometimes we see. So being able to not just, add more robots for throughput, but be able to handle those different use cases, those different things that are required through the different seasons.
Let's go back to that TikTok mention of Stanley Cups and things like that. What happens when warehouses have a bunch of material come in, say on a pallet or such, that they have to be able to ship out right away because people are asking for it? There's that hot demand for it. Are they able to pick directly from that pallet as opposed to having to stock it and put it into an ASRS or the like?
Absolutely. I think there's something that we've developed at Locus that is actually co-developed it with a customer, was one of their ideas. We call it fast pick. And as you mentioned, the key is that When you have inventory come in order for you to pull it out of a system like an ASRS or a goods to person system, you have to put the inventory into the system, which means if you have a pallet, you have to break the pallet. If you have cases, you have to break the cases. And that's time consuming. And you have touches of that inventory, and that costs money, particularly if you're 3PL, where every single touch is literally pennies dropping to the floor. The ability to do something like fast pick, where we have a customer that is a book publisher, right? And you have book releases constantly. And that one book is going to sell over and over and over again for a very short period of time. Or you're going to have something go viral, like you mentioned, like whether that's an Instagram trend or, something else. And you need to be able to bring that inventory in and have as little touches as possible. So we've innovated a way where you can have that as a location. And depending on whether it's a Gaylord or a pallet, you can have as many robot pick points as you want so that you can get upwards of 300, 400 UPH in that one pick location for that item. A lot of our customers do promotional items where they'll say, I'm doing a free giveaway with every single order, and they need to have a robot or an order goes through and they get all the items in the order, and then they have to stop by that final location before they go to pack out. That's another really common use case where we have customers that have just that very fast moving inventory. And then as the pallet is depleted, you just pop another one in, and the inventory, update the system, and it'll, reroute the robots and say, hey, there's more inventory there. We've seen a lot of customers with some really cool success points using that, where it's almost like a pseudo G2P, where you get that like fast moving inventory, and the picker is at one location because they're staying at the pallet location, and the robots are just coming to them, coming to them, coming to them. So they're not doing any walking. The robots are constantly there, and you're not having to worry about touching that inventory more than necessary.
So that gives basically almost unlimited throughput in a way that they're able to get out as quick without having to have the other steps of going into sorting into an ASRS or, having people walk the floors, etc. Are there other ways that warehouses can achieve that unlimited throughput through automation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a question that every single warehouse operator is asking, particularly when you consider the real estate costs. You think about the cost of leases, the cost of warehousing. A few years ago, Gartner released a report of like warehouse space availability, and it was going up and up and up. And then, of course, we kind of hit a little bit of a lull where space becomes a premium, so much so that like over, the COVID hangover, there was inventory being held in shipping containers in the yards. And so the cost of real estate is huge. So you want to be able to put as much throughput through every single square foot of your facility. So that's doing things like mezzanines or pick towers, where you can shrink the height, where you can have, the 6 foot, 7 foot ceilings, where you want to extend the racking all the way to the walls, have as many pick faces as possible. And then very narrow aisles. So aisles as narrow as only one human can walk with a cart one way. And being able to have automation that can be dynamic to adjust to that, rather than having to build a whole new structure or add a million more racks or not be able to take care of the vertical space. I think that's key. You got to look at throughput on a couple of different parameters, whether that's out and up, but also the type of throughput. There's a concept that we've talked about, which is like work density or pick density. How much work are you getting per square foot of your warehouse? And how much of it is kind of like wasted dead space, if you will, whether that's put away picking, inventory cycle counts. How much work are you getting through your warehouse in each square foot?
And that goes into a question I had about what metrics or indicators should warehouses look to about improving their throughput. And you're talking about the mezzanines, the pick rates, the things like that. Are there other indicators they should look at to measure how well their throughput is improved after they adopt automation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everybody knows of the LPH, or lines per hour, the
Mhm.
units per hour. Everybody does that. One of the key things that we're working on is within our platform of Locus Intelligence, we have a platform or a dashboard that kind of tells people those additional metrics that they should be keeping an eye on. So whether their associates are adhering to the processes that they should be adhering to, the accuracy levels, the mission time. So how much time is it taking to go from receiving an order to fulfilling that order and having it shipped out? A lot of customers have shipping deadlines or same day deadlines, or UPS has a 6 p.m. deadline and USPS has a 2 p.m. deadline. So they need to make sure that they get all the USPS orders out by then. So there's a whole host of metrics that warehouse operators should be using to drive their operation more intelligently. And I think that comes with data. And the key is that your metrics are only as good as your data is. And your data is only as good as the accuracy and the data collection methodologies that you have. And with manual methods, there's a ton of opportunity for error, for missed, check digits, for missed all kinds of stuff, right? Somebody puts inventory down in the wrong place or shorts an item and doesn't update the system, all kinds of opportunity for issue. And the key is that when you think about warehouse automation, particularly with something like robotics or mobile automation, all the data points along the line. So, we recently hit our 4 billionth pick. We're almost to 5 billion, I feel like already. And within that, it's not just the pick data. That's the data that's being collected. It's the associates that's picking it. It's their accuracy level, the time that it's taken to fulfill that mission. It's all those little detailed pieces of data that come together to actually have a full picture of the intelligent warehouse and what you can do to proactively change your management or change processes and update processes to improve those metrics. So there's so much more there, and I'm a math geek, so I could talk about metrics all day. But that's definitely something that's kind of the next generation is, taking that data, that intelligence, tagging it with AI, and getting a lot smarter about running your warehouse.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll have a future episode about data intelligence to dive into that even further. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the misconceptions that warehouses might have about automation, because they want to implement it for scalability and flexibility, but they might have heard that automation is starter automation or temporary automation or just for the small guys. What kind of misconceptions are out there that you hear?
Oh, geez, I love this question because there's so many. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I remember the days of ProMat where like the big systems integrators would bring these massive installations, like tons and tons of actual steel. And so when people were talking about warehouse automation, that's what they were talking about, the 20, 30, $50 million projects where you're bolting stuff to the ground, everything's conveyored, everything is, system on system on system, steel, moving things through the warehouse. So that's one extreme of warehouse automation. And I think people are moving towards a different extreme, which is mobile automation. And one of the misconceptions that you have about mobile automation is that it can be temporary or just a starter solution or something like that. But automation doesn't mean that you have to have everything built in steel and everything, within a conveyor or something like that, because that locks you into a certain process, that locks you into certain volume, capacity, all the things we talked about with flexibility out the window with a set standard, traditional, one of my colleagues calls it a monument. And so that's out the door when you have one of those. And the key to buyers and misconception is that that's what a lot of people have thought about for a long time. Then you have the little guys coming out with these little robots that are running around the warehouse. And often it's a system that we could use for a couple of years until we get our big one. Or, well, it doesn't cover all of the use cases that I need. Or, well, I don't think it's as fast as an ASRS. And all of those are misconceptions, because if you look at the flexibility that you have with mobile automation to be able to change your workflows, change your throughput, change vertically, horizontally, and use cases, change the fleet dynamics, whether you need like smaller robots or bigger robots, those types of things, and change the number of the fleet instantaneously, that actually preserves more automation within your facility than locking yourself into a grid or a cube. So I would encourage people to think about what are their true objectives with their warehouse, right? Do they want to lock themselves into a grid or a cube and be comfortable with that until their ROI pays off over 5, 10 years, right? Or do they want to be dynamic and forward thinking and at the cutting edge of innovation and technology and be able to leverage AI in their operations through mobile automation? The other misconception is that mobile automation only works for smaller facilities, and that's absolutely not true. We have facilities that are over 1 million square feet, as I mentioned, multiple levels, hundreds of robots. Any facility, any size is what a mobile automation can handle.
And we talked about adapting to get to the challenges through scalability and being able to be flexible as opposed to having those big monuments in the warehouse that you can't move. How do you see automation technologies adapting even further in the future?
I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be labor. I think we talked about at the beginning a little bit with the expectation of not just availability of labor, like less people willing, able, aware of working in the warehouse, but just different types of jobs. That's going to continue to be a challenge. As we look forward into 2025 and 2026, the labor markets are going to continue to change and evolve. The generations are going to continue to change and evolve. And that's going to continue to be a choke point. The other thing is that some people really love working in a warehouse and fulfilling the orders, but it's a very manual job and it's very stressful for a lot of people. Whether you're talking about younger people, whether you're talking about older people, whether you're talking about people with physical disabilities or other disabilities, it's not a very friendly place to work on your body all the time. So, ways that you can minimize that physical interaction and create roles and jobs and other jobs that are things around managing the physical aspect, but not actually having to do it, right? I think that's going to continue to be a big thing. We're going to continue to see more and more demand for throughput, more and more demand for leveraging AI in the right way. And, I think mobile automation is going to continue to be the most flexible option for a lot of facilities, in particular as you're thinking about exchanging different customers in and out of your facility, moving facilities, moving your inventory around, optimizing things, moving the product type around. Those are going to continue to be trends, I think.
So, one last question. I could talk to you for quite a while, but we're going to keep it short. What advice do you have for warehouse operators who are looking to add automation or thinking about automation to improve their scalability, flexibility, and throughput?
That's a great question. I actually get that one a lot. And I think there's a couple of things. Number one, think about your objective and who you want to be in the next, year, 2 years, 5 years, and not locking yourself into a solution that is going to be a headache in 5 years or 10 years. We all know, COVID was only 5 years ago. The supply chain and warehousing looked completely different 5 years ago than it does today. It's going to look completely different next year and 2 years from now. How do you look at your goals and what you want your facility to be, in the next couple of years? And when you look at that, look at the types of solutions that are available and what their ROI is, their time to ROI, their ability to be flexible, and their ability to handle that throughput. And then I think the last piece is who's done it and who's proven that they've done it. There's a lot of fly-by-night startups. Everybody's familiar with them. Robotics and innovation are great, but that doesn't always mean that everybody's here to stay, right? And here to stay with a lot of financial backing and financial stability, a lot of customers that they can learn from. The key to warehouse automation is a solution that's by warehouse people for warehouse people. Anybody can create a robot and have it mow their lawn and have it in their garage, but do they really know about lawn mowing, at the core? So same for warehousing is there's so much nuance. I said at the beginning, all the warehouses are the same, but every warehouse is different. Everybody does things a little bit differently. So you really need to work with somebody who has proven expertise within the warehousing space and has customers and people that they've been learning from and continually to innovate with to make their solution even better. So those are the things that I would consider, as you're looking at a warehouse automation project in the next couple of years.
Thank you. And thanks again, Kait, for joining. It was a pleasure to have you on this episode of Warehouse Automation Matters. And thank you, as always, to our listeners. We're here to help you get the information that you need in order to create a warehouse with unmatched flexibility and unlimited throughput.
Thank you.